The first thing I want to do, I want to go about, open the browser on my server, log in to my ACCCM 1X Agent Management Portal. I'm going to log in using the ITMD account, which is the super admin in the environment. There are no security restrictions on this account. By default, once logged in, you will see the Users tab. And under the Users tab, you can find two mini tabs. One for your user data, and the second for user groups, if you would like to go about and group your users and supervisors into a group entity. Let's take a look at my user right here. I'm going to double click, or you can either select and click on the Edit button to edit the existing user. I can set the username would be Liranbi, and by the way, if we're using SSO or LDAP root, I want to make sure that the username in here would be the same username for his Windows session. The password in here would be ignored because we're using LDAP root as authentication rather than database user. If I was to choose database user, then this password would be used to authenticate the user against our database. However, as I'm using LDAP root, this would be ignored, and we would use the Windows session credentials to log in the agent into the 1X client. The role for this entity would be an agent. I can also go with an agent supervisor or a web administrator. If I was to choose web administrator, the system would let me log in to the 1X Central Management Web Portal using this account. Under Assign Templates, I can see that this user is assigned to a Portal 2 template. We'll take a look in a few minutes what is this template, where it's configured, and what's the template settings. And keep in mind, you can go about, and if I was to double click on this entry right here, the system would display the template screen. However, this is a local template screen for this specific user. If I do any change on this screen right here, it will not affect all of the other users that are sharing this template. It would affect only this specific user. So again, if you're doing any change for a template under the user form from Assign Templates, the change would affect only that specific user. If I was to go to the Settings tab, and in the Settings tab, I would change the template, that change would affect all users that are assigned to this template. Nothing special under agent permissions. Here I can determine whether to use IAM contacts that are not in the contact list, can use soft TTI and so forth and so on. Again, in this example, I'm using a basic user. The user is configured for an SSO, and we're authenticating the user against the following domain. We'll take a look in a few minutes. What is this ITNV domain 01 and where it's configured? Let's go about and click on the Settings tab. By the way, if you're doing any change to the form without saving the form, the system would prompt you with a message and some unsaved changes. Do you want to leave this page? And I do want to leave this page. So go about and click on the Settings tab. Once I click on the Settings tab, the following would appear: location data. And here I can do a mapping between a host name and an extension, assign the extension password, and the call server or the switch address. And under Settings and Templates, we can go about and create 1X agent profiles or templates. Let's quickly double click on the one we're using, Portal 2. Once you double click on a template, the following screen appears, and here you can go about and change the template settings or the template configuration, whether it's the basic login for telephony, alternate server list, an agent login, an IAM login, screen pop, launch application. If I go about and click on agent at the bottom, I can see the agent related configuration for video, IAM, TDI, call handling, and UI. So again, just to recap or to stress out a very important element in here, under the following screen, settings and templates, you would be able to create or modify templates, and any change that you're doing to an existing template in here would be pushed down to all of the users that shares this template. Under contact lists, we can go about and create contact lists, nothing configured in this environment. And under domain, we'll find our domain configuration. As you can see, I've previously configured one of my domain controllers using the domain alias name, can be any name. Your LDAP server would be your domain controller. This is a non-secure LDAP environment, so we're using the default LDAP port. This would be the LDAP search route, and it's a bit tricky and it's dynamic. It can change from one environment to another. Under LDAP search route, we need to specify the search page, the search string in the LDAP environment, where we can find our lowercase down users. It can change from one environment to another. You can find on the ACCCM 1X agent configuration guide, you can find the relevant command to help you identify the search route in your environment. The following would be a username and password that has the permissions to read from the LDAP tree. I'm using the administrator account in this example because this is a lab domain controller. But again, all we need in here is just a read-only user for the Active Directory. There's no need to use an administrator account or any account with a member of the administrator or the domain administrator's group. Once you create your domain, in this case I have only one domain, let's go about and quickly create another one. Once you create the second domain, you have the option to go about and assign these or group these two domains under one entity. So now in this case I have two domain controllers, and if I go to domain groups and create a new group, I'll have the option to choose my domains and group them under one entity. Now if I go about and create a new user or update an existing one, you can see that under the domains section, again I'm using LDAP root, stands for SSO, now I can choose either the domain group, which means ACCCM will try to authenticate this account in front both domain controllers, O1 and O2, or I can choose just one out of the two right here. So again, back to settings and back to domain groups. We'll use domain groups to support multiple authentication for multiple domains in our ports. Again, we need to make sure that the ACCCM server would be a member of any one of these domains in order to authenticate in an SSO or single sign-on mode. Now, right here under the little arrow, the facing down arrow icon would be the import or export user function. If I click right here, I can see that I can go about and actually import from a CSV file all of the users in my environment. So if I'm getting a new, I don't know, a new 50 agents hired to my environment, I need to go about and provision the 50 agents into ACCCM instead of using UI for manual creation process. I can just use this CSV file in order to import the agents into the ACCCM environment. Further on, you can leverage the main ACCCM importer tool to import all of your users and agents from an Excel spreadsheet into the ACCCM, the CM, the Communication Manager, the CMS, IQ, Interaction Center, and even ACCCM1X. So you will have one single file that you will be using to provision entities to multiple products in your environment, whether it's the Communication Manager, the ACCCM CAM environment, or even Interaction Center, as an example. Now, let's go about and quickly try to log in with this account into the 1X client. And again, just to recap, this guy, Liran, is currently configured to use SSO and to log in via domain 01. I'm going to switch back to my secondary lab server. Again, I'm currently logged in into my QA domain with the Liran B account. And if I go about and launch the 1X client, again, what will happen on the back end, the process would be the client will search for this key in the registry, will take this key and try to communicate with the following URL, which is our web service. Our web service will check that it is using single sign-on, and in the database, our agent configuration or our agent authentication is set to SSO. Then the 1X agent web service will take this Windows session credentials and authenticate them or issue a challenge to the domain controller in order to authenticate the user. Let's go about and actually before I want to log in, I want to clear all of the 1X agent log files. We'll take a look in a second where we can find these log files for troubleshooting purposes. And now I can go about and launch the client. Now this is Windows Server 2008. I always like to do run as administrator just to prevent any security restrictions. So I'm going to use the 1X client. Again, in the back end, the client is checking the registry, communicating with the ACCCM 1X agent CAM web service. The web service is trying to authenticate this account in front of the domain controller. And now we can see that we're logged in into the 1X environment without having to authenticate my user. So again, the web service took my Windows session credentials and authenticated my session or my user in front of the domain controller. And now I can see that I'm in the client itself. What I want to show you guys quickly right here, if you go about and browse to the following path under the C drive, the users folder, your username, under app data, roaming, via 1X agent, 2.5, and log files, we can find the relevant log entries for this 1X client session. And if we're having any issues authenticating or any issues using the 1X agent CAM feature in ACCCM, the best thing to do is to use the log files in here and to try to understand what the problem is. If I open up the 1X log file, as you can see, the following, I'm going to highlight this following entry right here, the following would be issued from the client itself into the 1X config web service, including, and again, remember that I've mentioned that we must use a / under the registry, right here, we must input a / because the client itself is expecting a / and it will add the following syntax after the URL itself. If you fail to add a / you can easily recognize it by taking a look at the log file, and the log file will show you the following URL, and that would be your indication if you've missed the / in the end of the URL syntax. So this right here is the actual syntax that is sent to the ACCCM web service in order to authenticate the client itself. And if I open up Internet Explorer, I'll try to paste this syntax. This is a positive or a successful response. I'm actually, at the moment, what I just did by using this syntax in your browser, you're emulating an authentication scenario, right, to the ACCCM 1x web service. And if you'll see the following timestamp, protocol, and the username, including the remote host, it means that you've currently successfully logged into the ACCCM 1x environment. However, if you're getting an authentication failed message, a 500 internal error message, or a 401 message, it means that something is misconfigured in the environment, and I would check either the domain configuration in ACCCM 1x or the user registry with the central management URI. So this is pretty much straightforward, nothing too complex in here. I would refer back now to this server, and we'll go over and talk about the necessary steps that we need to take in order to successfully configure a single sign-on authentication under the 1x environment. And we'll actually go about and even do a small tweak in order to support both basic authentication and single sign-on. In order to support single sign-on, the following needs to be configured in ACCCM. The first thing we need to do, we need to locate our 1x CFG web service, and under authentication, double-click right here, we need to make sure to disable anonymous authentication and enable Windows authentication. That will be the very first step in order to support single sign-on for 1x. The second step, if I go back to my hard drive, I can find the ACCCM 1x CFG SSO. And under the web config file right here, I want to go about and change the authentication mode from basic to SSO. In order to do that, just double-click on the web config and change the following parameter right here from basic to NTLM. And of course, folks, this is fully documented on the ACCCM 1x configuration guide. There's no need to memorize or even take screenshots for it. It's fully documented, step by step, what needs to be done on the ACCCM end in order to support 1x single sign-on. So once we've changed the web config file and changed the login type from basic to NTLM, we need to make sure to point the client itself to the relevant web service, create the relevant domain configuration on ACCCM 1x management portal under domains, and finally create the user and make sure that the user authentication type is set for LDAP root, which means SSO. Now, I'll go about and quickly show you what needs to, if you want to support both basic and mixed, both basic and single sign-on, it's not mandatory, but what I would like to do as best practice, I always like to create a second instance of the 1x web service. So we have two instances. One would be configured for basic authentication, and the other would be configured for single sign-on. In order to do so, I'll go about, locate the ACCCM 1x CFG folder and just copy it to the same place. So now I have a copied instance of my folder. I would rename it to ACCCM1XCFG SSO. It's going to use SSO2 for now because I've previously configured it. We'll go to the web config file. I'm going to change the login type from basic to NTLM. Oh, my bad, sorry for that. So I'm going to change that for NTLM, and I'm going to save the file. So I've created another folder. I've changed the relevant settings on the web config file. Now what I want to do next, I want to create another website right here on the IIS and point my new website to this new folder on disk. So what I would do, I would just click right here and copy the path. And if I go back to IIS, under the default website, if I right click and add application, let's call it ACCCM1XCFG2. I'm going to select the application pool, which should be the ACCCM1X. And the physical path would be the folder that I just created. So I'm just going to paste the path that I've copied from here into the physical path field, and I'm going to click OK. So now we've got an ACCCM1XCFG2 folder, and the next step would be to change the authentication type, disable anonymous authentication, and enable Windows authentication. Finally, I can go about. If I click Browse right here, you would see the welcome message, or just a web page that says hi. If you'll see the following message, welcome to 1X web service, you know that it's configured properly and you can communicate with the agent web service. Now what I want to do, I want to change this. I want to point my client configuration or my client centralized management URI to this new web service. So I'll go back in here. I want to log out from the client. And under centralized management URI, I'm going to paste the new website name and issue a / in the end of the syntax. Now it will go about and launch the client again. The client will try to communicate with the 1X web service, with the new 1X web service. The new 1X web service will go about and authenticate in front of the domain controller and would log me in into ACCCM1X without having the need of manually authenticating my account. By the way, this login screen, folks, is the login to the switch. It has nothing to do with ACCCM at this point. So once you see the welcome message to 1X client, if you see the welcome message, that would be an indication that you're logged into 1X client in a centralized admin mode. This screen right here would represent the login to the switch for an extension, and later on login to an ACD with an agent login ID. Of course, you can pre-configure these values on the template itself or on the agent template on ACCCM1X.